Wanderer of the Wasteland, Chapter 14, Part 2. Adam would go on as he had begun, fighting the desert and its barrenness, its blasting heat and evil influences, wandering over these wastelands that must be his home. And he would take the physical prowess of him to yet harder, fiercer tasks of toil, driving his spirit to an intenser white flame. If the desert could develop invincible energy of strength in a man, he would earn it. If there were a divinity in man, infinitely beyond the beasts of the desert and the apes of the past, a something in mysterious affinity with that mighty being he sensed out there in the darkness, then he would learn it with a magnified and all-embracing consciousness. Adam went to his bed on the warm sands, complete in two characters, a sensing, watching, listening man, like the savage in harmony with the nature of the elements around him, and a feeling, absorbed, and mediating priest who'd begun to divine the secrets beyond the dark, shadowed, starlit desert. Adam's first sight of Death Valley came at an early morning hour. As he turned the last curve in the yawning canyon he had descended, he stood in awe. "Oh, desolation!" he cried, and it seemed that as the shock of the ghastliness beneath him passed, he remembered with flashing vividness all that had come to him in his long desert wanderings, which seemed now to accumulate its terrible silence. Desolation, death, and decay. He remembered the origin of that name, Death Valley. In 1849, when the California gold frenzy had the world in its grip, 70 Mormon gold seekers had wandered into this red-walled, white-floored valley where 68 of them perished. The two that escaped gave this narrow sink so many hundred feet below sea level the name of Death Valley. Many another immigrant and prospector and wanderer, by his death from horrible thirst and blasting heat and poison-dusted wind and destroying avalanche and blood-freezing cold, had added to the significance of that name and its dreadful fame. On one side, the valley was shadowed by the ragged funeral range, on the other by the gloomy red Panamints. Furnace Creek, the hot stream that came down from the burning slopes, and Ash Meadow, the valley floor, gray and dead like the bed of a dead sea, and the Devil's Chair, a huge seat worn by the elements in the red mountain wall, where the Death King of the valley watched over his fiends. These names were vivid in Adam's mind, along with others given by prospectors in uncouth or eloquent speech. "She's a hummer in July," said one and another. "Salty little hell," and still another. "Valley of the white shadow of death." Death Valley was more than 60 miles long, and from 7 to 12 miles wide. No two prospectors had ever agreed on these dimensions, although all had been in perfect harmony as to its hellish qualities. Death was the guardian of the valley and the specter that patrolled its beat. Mineral wealth was the irresistible allurement which dared men to defy its terrors. Gold. Dismukes himself claimed there were ledges of gold quartz, and Dismukes was practical and accurate. Many fabulous stories of gold hung on the lips of wandering prospectors. The forbidding red rocks held jewels in their hard confines, garnets, opals, turquoise. There were cliffs of marble and walls of onyx. The valley floor was a white crust where for miles and miles there was nothing but salt and borax. Beds of soda, of gypsum, of niter abounded in the vaster fields of other minerals. It was a valley where nature had been prodigal of her treasures and terrible in her hold upon them, but few springs and streams flowed down into this scoriac sink, and of these all were heavily impregnated with minerals in all unpalatable, many sour and sulfuric, some hot, a few of them deadly poison. In the summer months, the heat sometimes went to 145 degrees. The furnace winds of midnight were withering to the flesh and blood, and sometimes the air carried invisible death in shape of poison gas or dust. In winter, sudden changes of temperature, whirling icy winds down upon a prospector who'd gone to sleep in warmth would freeze him to death. Avalanches rolled down the ragged slopes, and cloudbursts carried destruction. Adam got his bearings according to the map made by Dismukes and set out from the mouth of the canyon to cross the valley. A long sandy slope, dotted by dwarf mesquites, extended down to the bare, crinkly floor of the valley, from which the descent to a lower level was scarcely perceptible. When Adam's burros rose early in the day, manifested uneasiness and weariness, there was indeed rough going. The sand had given way to a hard crust of salt or borax, and little dimples and cones made it difficult to place a foot on a level. Some places the crust was fairly hard, and others it cracked and crunched underfoot. The color was a mixture of a dirty white and yellow. Far ahead, Adam could see a dazzling white plain that resembled frost on a frozen river. End of chapter 14, part 2.